In the final, desperate months of World War II, as the Nazi regime crumbled, a silent, heroic chapter was being written. While battles raged and headlines screamed of territorial gains and losses, a different kind of war was being fought, a war for human lives. This is the story of the White Buses, an audacious rescue mission that snatched thousands from the very jaws of death, a testament to courage, diplomacy, and the enduring power of human compassion. It all began with a plea. By late 1944, the sheer horror of the Nazi concentration camps was becoming horrifyingly clear. Families of Scandinavian prisoners, particularly Norwegians and Danes held in German camps, were desperate. They turned to their governments, and their governments turned to one man, Count Folke Bernadotte, the vice president of the Swedish Red Cross. A nephew of the Swedish king, Bernadotte was a man of influence, a skilled diplomat with a reputation for navigating treacherous political waters. The mission proposed was almost unthinkable: negotiate directly with the leaders of the Third Reich, including the dreaded head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, to secure the release of prisoners. The plan was as bold as it was dangerous. The Swedish Red Cross would organize a fleet of vehicles, painted entirely white for neutrality, with large red crosses on their roofs, sides, and fronts to mark them as humanitarian transport. They would drive deep into a collapsing Germany, a landscape of chaos, Allied bombing raids, and fanatical SS troops, to gather Scandinavian prisoners from various camps and bring them to safety. It was a logistical nightmare and a diplomatic tightrope walk. Every detail, from fuel and food supplies to the exact routes, had to be meticulously planned. Bernadotte began his delicate dance with the devil. He met with Himmler several times, leveraging Himmler's deluded hope of brokering a separate peace with the Western Allies. Bernadotte argued that releasing Scandinavian prisoners would be a gesture of goodwill, a way for Himmler to improve his image and potentially save his own skin. It was a calculated risk, playing on the vanity and desperation of one of history's greatest monsters. Slowly, painstakingly, Bernadotte extracted concessions. First, the agreement was to gather all Scandinavian prisoners into one camp, Neuengamme, near Hamburg, supposedly for their own protection. Bernadotte knew this was just the first step. In March 1945, the White Buses rolled out. A force of over 300 personnel, drivers, nurses, mechanics, and soldiers, all volunteers, embarked on their journey. Their convoy consisted of buses, trucks, and ambulances, all painted stark white. They were unarmed, relying solely on their neutral status and the Red Cross emblem for protection, a fragile shield in a war zone where rules were often ignored. Their first destinations were camps like Sachsenhausen, Dachau, and the women's camp, Ravensbrück. The scenes that greeted them were from a nightmare. The volunteers, many of whom were young, and had never witnessed such suffering, were confronted with skeletal figures, eyes hollowed by starvation and despair. The prisoners, initially bewildered and suspicious, couldn't believe what they were seeing. These clean, white buses, driven by people speaking their own languages, seemed like a mirage, an impossible dream of rescue. One survivor later recalled seeing the Swedish flag and breaking down in tears, realizing that they had not been forgotten. The work was grueling and perilous. The drivers navigated roads shattered by bombs, constantly under the threat of Allied air attacks who might mistake them for military targets. They worked around the clock, often with little food or sleep. The nurses tended to the sick and dying, providing the first medical care and compassionate touch many had felt in years. They distributed food parcels, simple packages of bread, butter, and milk that were lifelines to people starving to death. The operation expanded. Bernadotte, through sheer force of will and relentless negotiation, managed to broaden the scope of the mission. He convinced Himmler to allow the buses to take not just Scandinavians, but also women from France, Poland, and other nations. The most critical phase began in late April 1945. Bernadotte secured a monumental agreement. The White Buses could evacuate thousands of women from the Ravensbrück concentration camp directly to Sweden. It became a race against time. The camps were being ravaged by typhus, and the SS were beginning to execute prisoners en masse to hide their crimes. The convoys became a constant stream of humanity. Buses designed for 50 passengers were carefully packed with over 100, the weeks supported by the slightly stronger. The journey itself was an ordeal, but every mile north was a mile closer to freedom. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, the White Bus's mission had achieved the incredible. They had rescued over 15,000 people from the concentration camps. Approximately half of them were Scandinavian, but the other half were people from over 20 different nationalities, including thousands of Jewish people. It was one of the largest and most successful rescue operations of the entire war, carried out not with weapons, but with diplomacy, courage, and a fleet of white-painted buses. The story of the White Buses is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, individuals can make a profound difference. The bravery of Folke Bernadotte and the hundreds of volunteers who risked their lives is a shining example of humanitarian action in the face of unspeakable evil. They drove into hell to bring people out, proving that a simple act of organized compassion could triumph over a regime of organized hate. Their legacy isn't just in the numbers saved, but in the powerful message their White Buses carried across a war-torn continent. The message that every single life is precious. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more hidden histories of courage and hope. We'll see you next time.